Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are so glad you're here with us. Today, we are opening a file that, on the surface, looks like a history lesson, but when you peel back the layers, it's really a survival guide.
It is. We're looking at a set of sources that argue that music, specifically this high concept mathematical music of the 14th century, was, well, a coping mechanism for the end of the world.
It sounds so dramatic when you put it that way, but honestly, looking at the material, it's not an exaggeration.
Not at all.
The title of the analysis we are covering today, and this comes from the incredible team at Viola Studio, is Music is a Science That Makes You Laugh, Sing, and Dance.
And I think for most people, when you hear medieval music, you probably think of, I don't know, Gregorian chants.
Yeah, monks in a dusty library. Very solemn, very simple.
Exactly. But this analysis, it paints a picture of a world that was just desperate, chaotic, and terrifying. And the musical response to that was hyper-precise and scientific.
And that's the tension we're exploring. We're in the 1300s. I mean, for the music students, teachers, or history buffs listening, you know this century. It has a reputation.
Oh, it does. It was arguably the worst time to be alive in recorded European history.
So how do you get from the absolute apocalyptic nightmare of the Black Death to the mathematical perfection of a musical style they called Ars Nova?
Because it's counterintuitive, right? You'd think chaos produces chaotic art.
But in this case, chaos produced structure, a very, very specific kind of structure.
And we're going to trace that line from the collapse of society to the construction of a new sonic order. And I want to flag this right up front for you listening.
Yeah, good point.
If you are a serious music student, a composition major, or an instrument instructor, this deep dive is, well, it's specifically for you. We're going to get into the weeds of isorhythm, the mechanics of the Messe de Notre Dame.
But if you aren't a music theory nerd, do not tune out. Because at its heart, this is a story about human psychology.
It is.
It's about how we react when the world stops making sense. Do we give up? Or do we find a new way to measure the universe?
Spoiler alert, we start measuring.
Welcome to Viola Studio. We are a YouTube channel dedicated to the technical, pedagogical, and artistic development of viola students and instrumentalists. In every episode, our goal is to provide a concise and entertaining analysis. We will explore key themes, the messages of the great masters, and the historical context that shaped the sound of our instrument. Whether you are taking your first steps in the alto clef, or you are a professional seeking a new perspective, there is something for everyone at Viola Studio.
Don't miss our upcoming episodes, and remember,
There's always time to explore the history and the heart of classical music.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The source material from Viola Studio really outlines the context, and it is bleak.
It is. We're not just talking about a bad political season or a recession here. We're talking about the environment literally turning against humanity.
Right. So around the year 1300, Europe enters what historians call the Little Ice Age.
And that sounds almost cozy, doesn't it? Like a few extra snow days?
Not at all. The reality was catastrophic. The average temperature dropped, rain patterns shifted, and the crops just stopped growing.
Which leads directly to the Great Famine from about 1312 to 1317. The analysis mentions people were eating their seed grain just to survive the winter.
Which means they had nothing to plant the next spring.
It was a complete downward spiral of starvation. And then just as society is weak and starving, the knockout blow arrives in 1347.
The Black Death. And the numbers are still shocking to read. The analysis cites that the plague killed up to 60% of Europe's population.
60%.
I mean, just pause and think about that. Look at your contact list on your phone and imagine deleting 6 out of every 10 people.
It effectively reset European civilization. And the psychological impact is what really matters for our story today.
Right, because for centuries, the medieval worldview was entirely faith-based. The narrative was, God is in control, pray, and the harvest will come.
Be righteous and you will be safe.
But then you pray, and the frost kills the wheat anyway. You live a righteous life, and the plague takes you and your entire family. It creates this massive crisis of certainty.
Exactly. It didn't necessarily mean people stopped believing in God, but they stopped believing that the old, simple ways of explaining the universe were, sufficient.
So if faith alone isn't explaining why the world is falling apart, you start looking for other mechanisms.
You start looking for the gears behind the curtain, and you see the rise of figures like Nicole Oresme.
Oresme, right. He was a French cleric, but also a scientist, active around the mid-1300s.
And he starts looking at the universe not just as a divine mystery, but as a complex machine. He's looking at the geometry of the cosmos, the ratios of the planets.
And this is the crucial pivot point in the Viola studio analysis. This desire to find rules and measurements in the universe, it doesn't stay locked in the astronomy tower.
No, it bleeds directly into the arts. It changes music fundamentally.
Because up until this point, music was polyphonic, sure. You had different voices singing together. But the rhythm, the element of time.
That was flexible. It was based on poetic modes. It was kind of fuzzy.
Right. You couldn't just hand a piece of sheet music to a stranger in another city and expect them to play the rhythm exactly right.
Not without hearing it first. The technology of writing time just didn't exist yet. Not with the precision we have today.
Enter Philippe de Vitry.
Our first major protagonist, born in 1291, died in 1361. He's a mathematician, a bishop, and a composer. And in 1322, he has a treatise called Ars Nova Notandi.
The New Art of Notation.
And that title, Ars Nova, or New Art, that became the brand name for this entire musical era. His breakthrough was effectively the invention of the time signature.
Okay, let's unpack that for the non-musicians listening. How does he actually change the way time is written?
So before Vitry, music was generally divided into threes.
The number 3 was perfect, right? The Holy Trinity.
Exactly. So you had a long note and a short note, and they almost always fit into this triple meter. Vitry comes along and says, wait a minute, we can divide notes into 2, we can divide them into 3, we can have these tiny little notes minims, and we can structure time however we want.
It sounds technical, but it's basically democratizing the beat.
It is.
It's no longer just the Holy Trinity beat. It's binary, it's ternary, it's complex. It's mathematical freedom.
And it allowed for a level of rhythmic independence that was completely impossible before. He wrote these motets, vocal compositions, where the different voices are moving in completely different rhythmic worlds, yet they lock together perfectly at specific structural points.
The analysis notes that only about 12 of his motets survive, which is a shame.
It is, but they serve as the blueprints for the next 50 years of music, and they introduce the concept that I think creates the most headaches for music history students.
But is also the coolest part of this whole era.
Isorhythm.
Here we go.
Yeah.
The science part of our title.
Ah.
Iso meaning same, rhythm meaning.
Well, rhythm.
Yeah, on the surface it sounds simple, same rhythm, like a loop on a drum machine.
But the way Viola Studio breaks it down, it's actually a really complex way of decoupling pitch and time.
That's the key word,
Wow.
decoupling. In modern pop music, the melody and the rhythm are usually married. If I hum a famous melody, the rhythm is locked to those notes.
Right.
In isorhythm, you treat them as 2 separate independent loops.
Okay, let's visualize this. I'm composing a piece. I start with the tenor voice, the lowest voice, the foundation.
Right, and you take a pre-existing melody, usually just a little snippet of Gregorian chant. That sequence of pitches is called the color.
The color. Okay, let's say my melody is 15 notes long. Okay, 15 notes. Imagine a necklace with 15 beads of different colors. That's your melody loop.
Got 15 beats.
Now, you need a rhythm to apply to those notes. This rhythmic pattern is called the telea. And let's say your telea is a specific rhythm that lasts for, say, 10 beats.
So I have a 15-note melody loop and a 10-beat rhythm loop. I start them at the same time. What happens?
Well, after 10 beats, your rhythm loop, the telea restarts, but you're only on note number 10 of your melody, the color.
Oh.
You still have 5 notes left in your melody sequence.
Oh, I see. So the second time the rhythm loop starts, it's applying that rhythm to the end of the melody, not the beginning. The accent shifts. The whole feel of the melody changes because it's being forced into a new rhythmic context.
Precisely. The gears are slipping. The melody and the rhythm are out of phase. You might have to repeat the rhythm pattern 3 times and the melody pattern twice before they finally line up again at the starting line.
Why? Why would you do this? It sounds incredibly difficult to compose and, frankly, kind of hard for the listener to even notice.
Yeah. Well, there's an element of intellectual flexing, for sure. But think back to Oresme and that clockwork universe.
Right, got the geometer.
They believed the universe was held together by these hidden numerical relationships. By building music with this hidden mathematical scaffolding, you aren't just making a catchy tune, you are mirroring the structure of the cosmos itself.
So it's structural engineering. The audience might not consciously count the telea, but they feel the stability. They feel the structure holding the piece together over a long span of time.
And for the students listening, this is really where composition moves from, improvising around a chant to architecture.
But predictably, whenever you have a bunch of young intellectuals disrupting the status quo with new art and math, the establishment gets a little nervous.
And in the 1300s, the establishment is the church, specifically Pope John Tertullus VII. He's kind of the antagonist in our story.
I have his decree here from 1323, and he is not holding back. He sounds furious.
He really does.
He says, certain disciples of the new art are preoccupied with their measured dividing up of beats. They chop up the melodies. They pad out the music with upper voices made of secular songs.
We forbid these methods. It's basically a cease and desist order from the Vatican.
So what was he actually afraid of? Was it just that it sounded messy to him?
It was the distraction. The motet started as a sacred genre, but with Ars Nova, the music became so complex, so seductive in its intricacy, that the Pope felt the text, the Word of God, was getting lost.
If you're busy listening to the cool, rhythmic interlocking of the upper voices, you weren't really thinking about your soul.
You're thinking about the math.
And to be fair to the Pope, he wasn't entirely wrong about that secular creep. The source material brings up Le Roman de Fauvel, and this thing is just bizarre.
It's a masterpiece of satire. It's this long poem about a donkey Fauvel who rises to power in the French royal court.
A donkey. And the name FAUVEL is an acronym for vices, right?
Yeah, flattery, avarice, vileness, and so on. It's a political cartoon.
But it's a political cartoon that contains some of the most advanced, high-tech music of the era.
It does. The manuscript has 130 musical pieces embedded in it, including 5 of Philippe de Vitry's motets.
So you have this wholly, mathematically perfect musical technique being used to soundtrack a story about a corrupt donkey destroying the church.
And that's the irony the analysis highlights. The science of music was neutral. It could be used to praise God, or it could be used to roast the Pope.
And despite the decree, the genie was out of the bottle. You couldn't uninvent the notation.
No. Which leads us to the man who took all these tools, the notation, the isorhythm, the complexity, and built the cathedral.
Guillaume de Machaut.
The giant of the 14th century. If you take one name away from this deep dive, it's Machaut.
What strikes me about him, based on the Viola Studio profile, is that he seems surprisingly modern. He's not some anonymous monk hiding in a cell.
No, he was a career man. He was a survivor. Born around 1300 in Champagne, he managed to attach himself to the most powerful people in Europe.
He worked for John of Luxembourg, the King of Bohemia, as a secretary and chaplain.
And that wasn't a desk job. King John was a warrior king. Machaut traveled with him all over Eastern Europe, into Italy. He saw the world.
And he secured these things called canonries, right? Which were basically tenured positions at cathedrals.
Yeah, in Verdun, Arras, and Reims. So he had a steady paycheck, regardless of whether he wrote a hit song or not. That kind of financial security is rare for an artist in any century.
And it gave him the freedom to experiment.
Absolutely. Even after King John was killed at the Battle of Crécy, another one of the century's disasters, Machaut just seamlessly moved to new patrons. He was highly connected and highly respected.
And he was famous, wasn't he? Not just known among the clergy.
Oh, he was a celebrity poet. Before we even get to the music, he was considered one of the greatest French poets of his time. He developed the fixed forms, the ballade, the rondeau, the virelai.
If you're a singer studying early music, you live in those forms.
They became the standard pop song structures for the next 150 years.
But the crown jewel, the work that really defines him, and this entire deep dive, is the Messe de Notre Dame, the Mass of Our Lady.
Written around the early 1360s. This is the milestone. This is the big one.
Okay, why? What makes this specific Mass so important compared to everything that came before?
Context is everything here. Before Machaut, a Mass, in a musical sense, was usually a compilation.
A mixtape, basically.
Kind of, yeah. You might take a Kyrie from one composer, maybe a Gloria that was just Planchant, a Sanctus from someone else. They didn't necessarily match in key or style.
So it was functional, but not artistically cohesive, more like a playlist than an album.
Exactly. Machaut writes the Messe de Notre Dame as a complete cycle. Kyrie, Gloria, Credo, Sanctus, Agnus Dei, Ite Missa Est all set by one person, conceived as one giant work of art.
That sounds normal to us now. We think of Beethoven's Missa Solemnis or Bach's B minor Mass, but in 1360 that was revolutionary.
It was the invention of the masterpiece. And he uses isorhythm to glue the whole thing together. He takes a chant, puts it in the tenor, and builds these massive architectural rhythmic structures around it.
There's a specific technical innovation mentioned in the analysis that I want to drill down on for the students listening. The contratenor.
Yes. This changes the sound of Western music forever.
Because up until this point, the standard texture for polyphony was 3 voices.
High, middle, low. The Trinity, perfect.
And Michaud adds a 4th voice.
He calls it the contratenor, literally against the tenor. It sings in the same range as the tenor voice.
What does that actually do to the acoustic experience? What does it sound like?
It fills in the gaps. It allows for fuller harmonies. For the composition students listening, this is the moment we start moving toward the standard 4-part harmony, soprano, alto, tenor, bass that you learn in Theory 101. It grounds the music. It makes it sound huge.
I was listening to a recording of the Kyrie while prepping for this, and huge is the word. It sounds like a wall of sound compared to the thinner stuff from a century earlier.
It creates a sonic space that matches the physical space of the Gothic cathedrals. It's imposing, and it's unified.
Now, there is one other thing about Michaud that I love. He seems to have had a fairly healthy ego.
Chuckles. He certainly knew his worth.
Most medieval art is anonymous, right?
Yeah.
We don't know who carved the statues in the cathedral. But Michaud did not want to be forgotten.
No, he did something almost unheard of. Toward the end of his life, he personally curated his own complete works. He supervised the scribes copying his manuscripts. He decided the order. He even added a prologue explaining his own genius.
That is such a modern move. It's like, here is my box set.
But thank goodness he did. Because of his ego, we have these pristine copies of his music. We know exactly what he wrote and how he wanted it notated. Without that vanity, the Messe de Notre Dame might have been lost or just scattered in fragments.
So let's look at the timeline. Michaud dies in 1377. The Pope didn't manage to stop the math. The plague didn't stop the music. So what happens next? Does it get simpler?
Quite the opposite. The generation after Michaud looked at what he did and basically said, "Hold my beer."
Of course they did.
We enter the era of ars subtilior,
Which translates to,
the even more subtle art, or maybe the more precise art.
it sounds exhausting already.
It was an avant-garde movement centered around Avignon and southern France. Composers like Bode Cordier and Matteo da Perugia, they pushed rhythmic notation to its absolute breaking point.
How so?
I mean, they were writing music with rhythms so complex, polyrhythms, shifting meters, crazy syncopations that even modern professional musicians sweat when they see the sheet music.
So they were experimenting with the limits of human perception.
Yeah.
Like, could you even play a rhythm of 4 against 3 against 9?
All while singing a melody that changes key. It sounds like the free jazz or maybe the math rock of the 1400s.
Wow.
It was complexity for complexity's sake in a way, but it proved that the system Vitry had invented was robust enough to handle anything.
So Ars Nova wasn't a fad. It was a foundation.
It formed the basis for Western rhythmic notation as we know it today. Every time a musician reads a quarter note or a rest, they are using a system that traces its DNA right back to Philippe de Vitry and the 14th century.
So when we step back and look at this whole narrative, from the freezing crops of the Little Ice Age to the hyper-complex scores of the Ars Subtilior, what is the big takeaway?
For me, it's about the resilience of the human spirit, but specifically how that spirit seeks order. When the physical world became unpredictable, when death was literally in the air, these artists didn't retreat into chaos.
No, they built a sonic world that was perfectly ordered.
They fought entropy with geometry.
That's a great way to put it.
Precisely. Michaud's isorhythm is a cage, yes, it's a strict set of rules. But inside that cage, the music soars. It proves that constraints don't kill creativity. They force it to evolve.
That is a powerful thought. The math didn't stifle the emotion. It gave it a skeleton strong enough to survive the centuries.
And it's why we are still talking about a guy from Reims 650 years later.
I want to give a massive thank you to Viola Studio for the incredible analysis that powered this discussion. It's a dense topic, but seeing that link between the plague and the polyphony really changes how you hear the music.
Absolutely. It stops being a museum piece and starts feeling like a survival story.
And to you listening, whether you're cramming for that music history final, preparing a lecture on medieval modes, or just someone who loves the hidden mechanics of the world, we hope this deep dive gave you a new lens to look at the past.
There is always more to find in the margins of those manuscripts.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the archives. Until then, keep listening and keep counting. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope this summary and analysis have been of great help to you. Please remember that this is only a summary and can never replace the book itself. Therefore, we invite you to truly immerse yourself in the work by reading the original text. If this content was useful to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. Remember, you can share this video with your friends to help our community continue to grow. Warmest regards, and remember, there is always time to learn and explore the world of classical music. A Viola Studio production.